Around 12,900 and 11,700 years ago, Earth experienced the most dramatic climate reversals in recent geological history. The Younger Dryas period saw global temperatures plummet almost overnight, plunging much of the northern hemisphere back into near-glacial conditions after a period of insane warming. What makes this event particularly disturbing is its speed and global impact. Temperatures in Greenland dropped by up to 18 degrees Fahrenheit in just 3 years. Ocean currents that had remained stable for millennia suddenly shifted. Ice sheets that had been retreating began advancing again. The entire planet's climate system seemed to reset itself with devastating consequences for any societies that had adapted to the preceding warm period. Archaeological evidence from this period is frustratingly sparse, creating a massive gap in our understanding of how human communities responded to such rapid environmental change. Agricultural settlements that had begun developing would have faced complete crop failure. Coastal communities would have been displaced by changing sea levels. Entire regions that had supported complex societies would have become uninhabitable. The Younger Dryas coincides with several significant developments in human history, including the apparent acceleration of agricultural development in the Middle East and the emergence of megalithic construction in various parts of the world. Some researchers propose that the environmental catastrophe forced human societies to develop new survival strategies, leading to innovations in food production and social organization. But here's what's truly unsettling about this lost epoch. If advanced societies had existed before the Younger Dryas, their traces would likely have been obliterated by advancing ice sheets and 12 centuries of environmental chaos. The archaeological record preserves only a tiny fraction of human activity under normal conditions. A climate catastrophe of this magnitude could have erased evidence of entire civilizations. The discovery of Gobekli Tepe in Turkey has begun challenging traditional assumptions about what was possible during this period. Built around 11,000 years ago, this site demonstrates that hunter-gatherer societies were capable of organizing massive construction projects requiring sophisticated planning and coordination. The site includes carved stone pillars weighing up to 20 tons arranged in circular patterns with apparent astronomical alignments. What makes Gobekli Tepe revolutionary is that it predates the development of agriculture by several thousand years. Traditional models suggest that monumental architecture requires agricultural surpluses to support specialized craftsmen and complex social hierarchies. Yet this site was built by societies that were still primarily nomadic. The implications extend far beyond a single archaeological site. If nomadic societies could organize construction projects on this scale during the environmental chaos of the Younger Dryas, what might settled communities have accomplished during more favorable climatic periods? How many other sophisticated sites remain buried beneath millennia of geological deposits? The deliberate burial of Gobekli Tepe around 8,000 years ago suggests that its builders understood the importance of preserving knowledge through periods of upheaval. Without this intentional preservation, we would have no evidence that such sophisticated construction was possible so early in human history. This pattern of accidental preservation creating artificial gaps in our knowledge appears throughout the archaeological record. The dry climate of Egypt preserved documents that would have decomposed elsewhere, giving us detailed knowledge of Egyptian civilization, while leaving us largely ignorant about contemporary societies in wetter climates. The systematic nature of these preservation biases means that our understanding of human development depends heavily on the accidents of environmental conditions and geological processes. Entire categories of human achievement might remain invisible simply because they occurred in regions or time periods where preservation was unlikely. But environmental catastrophe represents only one mechanism for creating lost epochs. The second lost epoch takes us beneath the waves to civilizations that may have achieved technological sophistication we're only beginning to understand. When the last ice age ended roughly 15,000 years ago, melting glaciers caused global sea levels to rise by more than 400 feet. This massive flooding didn't just reshape coastlines. It obliterated millions of square miles of inhabited land, taking with it any evidence of the societies that had flourished there during periods of lower sea level. Think about where human populations concentrate today. Coastal areas, river deltas, natural harbours. These locations offer access to marine resources, moderate climates, and natural transportation routes. If Ice Age populations followed similar patterns, then the post-glacial flooding would have destroyed the archaeological record of entire civilizations. Recent underwater discoveries have begun revealing tantalizing glimpses of what lies hidden beneath the continental shelves. Off the coast of Japan, divers have documented the Yonaguni Monument, a massive underwater structure featuring precisely cut stone blocks, right-angle corners, and geometric patterns that appear too regular to be natural formations. If artificial, this monument would have been constructed when the area was above sea level, placing its creation at least 10,000 years ago. Similar anomalies have been identified using side-scan sonar near India's coast, where geometric patterns on the seafloor suggest human construction. These sites remain largely unexplored due to the enormous technical challenges and costs of underwater archaeology, leaving vast areas of potentially revolutionary archaeological evidence inaccessible to current research. The implications are staggering. If coastal civilizations had developed sophisticated knowledge systems during the Ice Age, the flooding of their territories would have destroyed not just physical remains, but libraries, educational centers, and accumulated cultural wisdom. Survivors would have faced the monumental task of rebuilding human civilization from fragmentary memories and scattered artifacts. This scenario might explain one of archaeology's most persistent mysteries. Why do advanced capabilities seem to appear suddenly in the historical record without clear developmental phases? Rather than emerging spontaneously, post-flood civilizations might have been rebuilding and adapting ancient wisdom that survived in oral traditions and symbolic systems. The global distribution of flood myths supports this interpretation. Cultures across every inhabited continent preserve detailed stories of catastrophic flooding that destroyed previous civilizations. These narratives describe not local disasters, but global catastrophes followed by the rebuilding of human society from scattered remnants. The consistency of these flood traditions across isolated cultures suggests either shared historical experience or common source material about actual past events. If these stories preserve memories of real catastrophes, they might represent our only access to knowledge about civilizations that were destroyed so completely that no other evidence survived. Number 3. Around 1200 years before the Common Era, the Mediterranean world was home to some of the most sophisticated societies in human history. The Mycenaean Greeks had built palatial centers that rivaled anything seen before. The Hittite Empire controlled vast territories across Anatolia. Egyptian pharaohs ruled a kingdom that had endured for millennia. Complex trade networks connected these civilizations in webs of commerce and cultural exchange that stretched from the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean. Then in the span of just a few decades, this entire system collapsed. Not gradually through slow decline, but suddenly and catastrophically. Palace centers were abandoned. Writing systems disappeared. International trade ceased entirely. Populations scattered, leaving behind empty ruins and peoples who had forgotten fundamental technologies like literacy. What makes this collapse particularly mysterious is its scope and synchronization. This wasn't one civilization falling to internal problems or external invasion. Multiple advanced societies across thousands of miles experienced coordinated system failure. The Hittite capital was burned and abandoned. Mycenaean palaces throughout Greece were destroyed. Cities across the Levant were razed. Even mighty Egypt survived but was severely weakened. Traditional explanations point to mysterious raiders known as the Sea Peoples, maritime warriors whose origins remain completely unknown. Egyptian records describe them as foreign tribes who swept across the Mediterranean, destroying everything in their path. But this explanation creates more questions than it answers. The Sea Peoples appear in historical records primarily as destroyers with almost no information about their society, origins, or ultimate fate. They seem to exist solely to explain the collapse, then vanish just as mysteriously as they arrived. Recent scholarship suggests the Sea Peoples might have been symptoms of broader systemic failures rather than their cause. Climate data indicates the period saw significant drought and environmental stress. Archaeological evidence points to internal conflicts within these civilizations before any external invasions occurred. The collapse may have resulted from cascading failures where resource depletion, political instability, and climate change created a perfect storm of civilizational breakdown. What followed was 4 centuries known as the Greek Dark Ages, during which much of the accumulated knowledge and cultural achievement of the Bronze Age simply vanished. Literacy disappeared almost entirely across the affected regions. Monumental architecture ceased. Population levels dropped dramatically. International trade networks that had operated for centuries were completely severed. This wasn't just political collapse. It was cognitive and cultural erasure on a massive scale. The pattern reveals something deeply unsettling about human civilization. Advanced societies don't just lose political power or military strength. They lose fundamental capabilities. Technologies that took generations to develop are forgotten. Social institutions that provided stability for centuries stop functioning entirely. Knowledge systems that required lifetimes to master disappear as if they never existed. This brings us to our 4th lost epoch, one that challenges everything we think we know about ancient technological capabilities. The Harappan civilization flourished across more than 1 million square kilometers of what is now Pakistan, northwestern India, and eastern Afghanistan from around 2600 to 1900 years before the Common Era. The Harappans built some of the world's first planned cities, complete with sophisticated drainage systems, standardized weights and measures, and evidence of trade networks reaching from Afghanistan to Gujarat. Their urban planning was so advanced, it wouldn't be matched again until the Roman period, nearly 2,000 years later. Yet, despite their obvious sophistication, the Harappan civilization presents us with a unique form of historical gap. We cannot decipher their writing system despite numerous attempts by linguists and cryptographers. This means we have no access to their literature, laws, religious beliefs, or historical records. We can observe the physical remains of their achievements, but we cannot hear their voices or understand their thoughts. It's like watching a sophisticated civilization through soundproof glass, able to see but unable to communicate or truly comprehend their worldview. The mystery deepens when we examine the decline of Harappan cities around 1900 years before the Common Era. The careful urban planning deteriorated. Drainage systems were poorly maintained. Eventually, the cities were abandoned entirely. By 1300 years before the Common Era, the Harappan civilization had completely vanished. Recent research suggests climate change played a crucial role, with the drying up of river systems, forcing agricultural communities to abandon their settlements. But without the ability to read their records, we can only speculate about how the Harappans understood and responded to these environmental challenges. This pattern of advanced civilizations, achieving remarkable heights, then vanishing into historical obscurity, repeats itself across different continents and time periods, leading us to our 5th lost epoch in the Americas. The Olmec civilization emerged around 1500 years before the Common Era with fully developed writing systems, sophisticated calendar calculations, and monumental sculpture demonstrating advanced artistic and engineering capabilities. Their massive basalt sculptures, weighing up to 50 tons each, required not only technical ability to carve extremely hard stone, but also logistical capability to transport these monuments across difficult terrain. The precision of their carvings suggests knowledge of human anatomy and artistic techniques that typically develop through generations of accumulated tradition. Yet the Olmec appear in the archaeological record without clear predecessors. Their writing system, artistic style, religious iconography, and technological capabilities seem to emerge fully formed. When their civilization declined around 400 years before the Common Era, much of their knowledge disappeared with them, creating another gap that wouldn't be filled until the rise of later Mesoamerican societies. The Olmec left behind remarkable achievements, but the knowledge systems that created them vanished as completely as if they had never existed. This pattern of sudden appearance and equally sudden disappearance brings us to our sixth lost epoch, one that reveals how entire knowledge traditions can be erased from human memory. The Maya civilization reached extraordinary heights of mathematical, astronomical, and architectural achievement during what scholars call the Classic period from 250 to 900 years of the Common Era. They developed one of the most sophisticated writing systems in the ancient world, created accurate calendars tracking celestial cycles over thousands of years, and built cities housing hundreds of thousands of people. Then around 900 years into the Common Era, Maya civilization in the southern lowlands simply collapsed. Major cities were abandoned. Construction ceased. Populations dispersed. The collapse was so sudden and complete that many Maya cities were swallowed by jungle and remained hidden for over 1,000 years. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 16th century, they found Maya descendants living in small villages with no memory of the great cities their ancestors had built. Entire libraries of knowledge had been lost. Astronomical observations spanning generations had been forgotten. Architectural techniques that had created some of the most impressive structures in the ancient world had vanished from human memory. What makes the Maya collapse particularly mysterious is that it occurred during a period of apparent prosperity and expansion. There's no evidence of foreign invasion, natural disaster, or epidemic disease that would explain such sudden abandonment of major urban centers. The Maya had successfully adapted to environmental challenges for centuries. They had developed sophisticated water management systems, agricultural techniques suited to tropical environments, and trade networks spanning vast distances. Yet somehow they lost the ability to maintain their civilization almost overnight. Our seventh lost epoch takes us to Europe, where megalithic builders created some of the most puzzling monuments in human history before their knowledge traditions vanished just as mysteriously. Between 5,000 and 1,500 years before the Common Era, communities across Europe constructed massive stone monuments requiring sophisticated understanding of astronomy, engineering, and mathematics. These weren't simple piles of rocks, but precisely aligned observatories tracking celestial cycles across generations. Stonehenge demonstrates knowledge of solar and lunar cycles, eclipse prediction, and geometric relationships that shouldn't have been possible with the tools and social organization associated with Neolithic communities. The site's construction required moving massive stones across hundreds of miles, lifting them into position with mathematical precision, and aligning them with astronomical phenomena observable only through decades of systematic study. What makes this even more mysterious is that similar megalithic sites appeared simultaneously across Europe from Scotland to Malta, suggesting shared knowledge systems operating across vast distances. These communities somehow coordinated massive construction projects and maintained cultural continuity across generations without evidence of centralized authority or long-distance communication networks. Then, around 1,500 years before the Common Era, megalithic construction simply stopped. The knowledge systems that had enabled these remarkable achievements vanished so completely that later European civilizations had no understanding of how the monuments were built or what they represented. The Greeks and Romans viewed these ancient sites as the work of giants or supernatural beings, having completely lost cultural memory of their human creators. Entire traditions of astronomical knowledge, engineering techniques, and mathematical understanding had been erased from European culture. Our eighth lost epoch reveals how advanced maritime civilizations can disappear from the historical record, taking with them knowledge systems that enabled some of the most remarkable achievements in human exploration. Polynesian navigators accomplished feats of exploration and settlement that remain impressive by modern standards. Using sophisticated knowledge of astronomy, ocean currents, and weather patterns, they navigated across thousands of miles of open ocean to settle islands from Easter Island to New Zealand, creating a vast maritime civilization spanning nearly half the Pacific. The wayfinding techniques that enabled these achievements required generations of accumulated knowledge. Navigators learned to read wave patterns, interpret cloud formations, and track celestial movements with precision that allowed them to find tiny islands across vast expanses of ocean. This wasn't luck or accident, but systematic knowledge passed down through carefully maintained educational traditions. Yet much of this navigational wisdom was lost, or nearly lost, by the time European explorers arrived in the Pacific. Sophisticated wayfinding techniques that had enabled settlement of remote islands survived only in scattered communities and oral traditions. Entire systems of oceanic navigation that had taken generations to develop were on the verge of disappearing completely. The near loss of Polynesian navigation knowledge demonstrates how quickly sophisticated systems can vanish when the social structures supporting them are disrupted. Traditional educational methods, cultural institutions, and knowledge transmission systems can be destroyed much faster than they can be rebuilt. Our ninth lost epoch takes us to Africa, where advanced kingdoms developed sophisticated political systems, architectural techniques, and cultural achievements before vanishing from the historical record. The Kingdom of Kush developed complex writing systems and built impressive pyramids, creating a civilization that rivaled its more famous Egyptian neighbors. Kushite rulers actually conquered Egypt for a period, demonstrating military and political sophistication that enabled them to control vast territories across northeastern Africa. Yet, around 350 years of the Common Era, the Kingdom of Kush disappeared from history. The reasons for its decline remain largely unknown, creating another significant gap in our understanding of African civilizational development. The knowledge systems that had sustained Kushite culture, their administrative techniques, architectural methods, and cultural traditions, vanished so completely that later societies had no memory of their achievements. This pattern of advanced African civilizations rising and falling without leaving accessible records appears repeatedly across the continent, suggesting that our understanding of African history is severely limited by the systematic erasure of entire epochs of human development. The final lost epoch in our examination reveals perhaps the most disturbing pattern of all. The systematic destruction of knowledge that occurs when civilizations collapse doesn't just erase practical information. It eliminates entire ways of understanding the world. When the Library of Alexandria was destroyed, it wasn't just scrolls and books that were lost. Entire intellectual traditions, philosophical systems, and scientific methodologies disappeared. The accumulated wisdom of generations of scholars, the results of centuries of systematic observation and experimentation, and the cultural frameworks that had enabled remarkable intellectual achievements, were erased almost overnight. Similar destructions occurred across the globe whenever civilizations collapsed. In China, the burning of books during various dynastic transitions destroyed vast amounts of accumulated knowledge. In the Americas, Spanish conquistadors systematically destroyed Maya codices, eliminating written records of sophisticated astronomical and mathematical knowledge. These weren't isolated incidents, but recurring patterns that reveal how fragile human knowledge truly is. The intellectual achievements that seem so permanent and established can vanish completely when the social systems supporting them are disrupted. What makes these lost epochs truly disturbing isn't just what we've lost, but what they reveal about the cyclical nature of human development. The evidence suggests that our species repeatedly achieves remarkable heights of cultural and technological sophistication before falling into periods of darkness where accumulated knowledge disappears. The forces that created these gaps continue operating today. Climate change, social instability, resource depletion, and technological disruptions still threaten the continuity of human civilization. The same patterns that erased previous epochs could easily erase our current achievements, leaving future archaeologists to puzzle over the mysterious disappearance of 21st century civilization. First century civilization. The archaeological evidence keeps mounting, but mainstream institutions refuse to acknowledge what these patterns really mean. Each lost epoch we've examined follows the same terrifying trajectory. Advanced knowledge appears suddenly, achieves remarkable heights, then vanishes so completely that later generations inherit only fragments and myths. But there's something even more unsettling about these disappearances. They're not random events scattered across human history. They're systematic erasures that follow predictable patterns, suggesting that the forces destroying these civilizations operate according to rules we don't fully understand yet. Take the precision with which these knowledge systems vanish. When the megalithic builders of Europe stopped constructing their astronomical monuments, they didn't gradually lose their capabilities over centuries. The knowledge disappeared overnight, as if someone had flipped a switch and turned off an entire educational system. Future generations found themselves staring at monuments they couldn't comprehend, built by predecessors who seemed to possess supernatural abilities. The Maya present an even more chilling example of systematic knowledge erasure. Here was a civilization that had developed writing systems sophisticated enough to record complex astronomical calculations, mathematical concepts that wouldn't be rediscovered until the modern era, and architectural techniques that created some of the most impressive structures in the ancient world. Yet when their cities were abandoned, all of this accumulated wisdom vanished so completely that descendant populations had no memory of their ancestors' achievements. What makes this pattern truly disturbing is the speed of the collapse. These weren't gradual declines where knowledge slowly deteriorated over generations. These were sudden breaks in cultural continuity, where entire educational systems, libraries, and knowledge transmission methods simply ceased to function. It's as if the civilizations experienced some kind of cognitive reset that wiped out centuries of accumulated learning almost instantly. The Harappan civilization demonstrates another aspect of this systematic erasure. Their writing system remains undecipherable, not because it's primitive or simple, but because the cultural context that would allow us to understand it has been completely destroyed. We can see that they possess sophisticated organizational capabilities, advanced urban planning, and complex trade networks. But without access to their written records, they remain voiceless in the historical record. This creates a particularly unsettling form of historical gap. We know these people existed. We can observe evidence of their achievements, but they might as well be from another planet for all we can understand about their thoughts, beliefs, or knowledge systems. The cultural bridge that would allow us to comprehend their civilization has been burned so thoroughly that we're looking at them across an unbridgeable chasm. The pattern becomes even more disturbing when we examine the global scope of these erasures. The Bronze Age collapse affected multiple advanced civilizations simultaneously across thousands of miles. The Younger Dryas climate catastrophe created gaps in the archaeological record across entire continents. Rising sea levels at the end of the Ice Age flooded coastal areas worldwide, potentially destroying evidence of maritime civilizations we'll never be able to recover. These weren't isolated regional disasters, but coordinated system failures that affected human development on a planetary scale. The synchronization suggests that whatever forces create these lost epochs operate according to larger patterns that transcend individual civilizations or geographical regions. Recent discoveries have begun revealing just how much we've lost to these systematic erasures. Underwater archaeology has identified structures off multiple coastlines that appear to show evidence of human construction, predating the accepted timeline for sophisticated architecture. These sites remain largely unexplored due to technical limitations, but they hint at entire categories of human achievement that were destroyed by post-glacial flooding. The Yonaguni Monument off Japan features precisely cut stone blocks and geometric patterns that would require advanced knowledge of engineering and mathematics to construct. If artificial, this structure would push back the timeline for sophisticated stone architecture by thousands of years. Similar anomalies identified near India's coast suggest that we're only beginning to glimpse what lies hidden beneath the continental shelves. But here's what makes these underwater discoveries truly chilling. If these structures represent evidence of Ice Age civilizations, then we're looking at the remains of societies that achieved remarkable technological capabilities before being completely erased by rising sea levels. The flooding wouldn't have just destroyed their physical infrastructure, it would have eliminated their libraries, their educational institutions, and their accumulated cultural knowledge. Survivors of such catastrophic flooding would have faced the monumental task of rebuilding human civilization from fragmentary memories and scattered artifacts. This scenario might explain why advanced capabilities seem to appear suddenly in the post-flood archaeological record. Rather than developing independently, historical civilizations might have been rebuilding ancient knowledge that survived in oral traditions and symbolic systems. The global distribution of flood myths supports this interpretation. Cultures across every inhabited continent preserve detailed stories of catastrophic flooding that destroyed previous civilizations. These aren't vague references to local disasters, but specific narratives describing global catastrophes, followed by the rebuilding of human society from scattered remnants. The consistency of these flood traditions across isolated cultures suggests either shared historical experience or common source material about actual past events. If these stories preserve memories of real catastrophes, they represent our only access to knowledge about civilizations that were destroyed so completely that no other evidence survived. This brings us to perhaps the most unsettling aspect of these lost epochs. The knowledge systems that disappeared weren't just practical technologies for survival. They represented sophisticated intellectual achievements that required abstract thinking, mathematical reasoning, and systematic observation spanning generations. The ability to predict eclipses, calculate planetary movements, and design monuments maintaining precise astronomical alignments across centuries represents cognitive capabilities we associate with much later periods of human development. Yet this advanced knowledge repeatedly appears and disappears in the archaeological record, as if it were being transmitted by invisible networks that leave no other trace. Communities separated by thousands of miles and centuries somehow developed similar astronomical knowledge, mathematical concepts, and architectural techniques without any obvious means of communication or cultural exchange. The global distribution of pyramid construction, the widespread use of precise astronomical alignments, and the recurring appearance of sophisticated mathematical relationships in ancient architecture suggest knowledge transmission systems that operated beyond our current understanding. The megalithic builders of Europe present one of the most puzzling examples of this phenomenon. Between 5,000 and 1,500 years before the Common Era, communities across the continent constructed massive stone monuments requiring sophisticated understanding of astronomy, engineering, and mathematics. These sites appeared simultaneously from Scotland to Malta, suggesting shared knowledge systems operating across vast distances. Stonehenge demonstrates knowledge of solar and lunar cycles, eclipse prediction, and geometric relationships that shouldn't have been possible with Neolithic tools and social organization. The site's construction required moving stones across hundreds of miles, lifting them with mathematical precision, and aligning them with astronomical phenomena observable only through decades of systematic study. Yet around 1,500 years before the Common Era, megalithic construction simply stopped. The knowledge systems that had enabled these achievements vanished so completely that later European civilizations viewed the monuments as supernatural creations. The Greeks and Romans had no understanding of how these structures were built or what they represented. This pattern of advanced knowledge, appearing suddenly and vanishing just as quickly, repeats itself across different continents and time periods. The Olmec civilization emerged with fully developed writing systems, sophisticated artistic techniques, and engineering capabilities that seem to have no clear predecessors. When their culture declined, much of their knowledge disappeared, creating gaps that wouldn't be filled until later Mesoamerican societies developed similar capabilities. The technological implications become even more disturbing when we consider what these achievements required. Moving 50-ton stone sculptures across difficult terrain, carving precise astronomical alignments into massive monuments, and developing mathematical concepts that wouldn't be rediscovered for centuries, all demanded accumulated knowledge, systematic education, and complex social organization. Yet these capabilities appear in the archaeological record almost overnight, as if entire educational systems and knowledge traditions materialized from nothing. The precision of ancient construction, the sophistication of astronomical observations, and the mathematical relationships embedded in megalithic architecture suggest inheritance of complete knowledge packages rather than gradual development. The Kingdom of Kush provides another example of how advanced civilizations can achieve remarkable heights before vanishing completely from the historical record. This African kingdom developed sophisticated writing systems, built impressive pyramids, and created political institutions complex enough to enable conquest of Egypt itself. Yet around 350 years of the Common Era, Kush disappeared from history. The reasons for decline remain unknown, creating another massive gap in our understanding of African civilizational development. The knowledge systems that had sustained Kushite culture, their administrative techniques, architectural methods, and cultural traditions vanished so completely that later societies retained no memory of their achievements. Polynesian navigation presents perhaps the most poignant example of how quickly sophisticated knowledge systems can disappear when social structures supporting them are disrupted. These maritime cultures accomplished feats of exploration that remain impressive by modern standards, using sophisticated understanding of astronomy, ocean currents, and weather patterns to navigate across thousands of miles of open ocean. The wayfinding techniques enabling these achievements required generations of accumulated knowledge. Navigators learned to read wave patterns, interpret cloud formations, and track celestial movements with precision, allowing them to find tiny islands across vast ocean expanses. This systematic knowledge was passed down through carefully maintained educational traditions spanning centuries. Yet much of this navigational wisdom was lost by the time European explorers arrived in the Pacific. Sophisticated wayfinding techniques that had enabled settlement of remote islands survived only in scattered communities and oral traditions. Entire systems of oceanic navigation that had taken generations to develop were on the verge of complete disappearance. The systematic nature of these knowledge losses reveals something deeply unsettling about human civilization. We're not looking at random accidents or isolated disasters. We're seeing evidence of recurring patterns where advanced societies repeatedly achieve remarkable heights before experiencing cognitive and cultural resets that erase centuries of accumulated learning. These lost epochs force us to confront the most uncomfortable truth about human development. Our current technological civilization might not be the first to achieve global influence and sophisticated capabilities. Previous cycles might have reached similar or even greater heights before being destroyed by catastrophic events that left only scattered traces in the archaeological record. The forces that created these historical gaps continue operating today with the same devastating potential. Climate catastrophe, social collapse, resource depletion, and technological disruption still threaten the continuity of human knowledge, just as they did in previous epochs. The same patterns that erased earlier civilizations could easily destroy our current achievements, leaving future archaeologists to puzzle over the mysterious disappearance of 21st century society. But perhaps the most chilling realization is that these aren't just historical curiosities or academic mysteries. They're active warnings about the fragility of everything we've built, the accumulated knowledge of our species, the technological capabilities we take for granted, and the cultural institutions that preserve human learning are far more vulnerable than we want to acknowledge. These 10 lost epochs reveal a truth that mainstream education desperately wants to hide. Human civilization doesn't follow the neat upward progression we've been taught to believe. Instead, we rise and fall in cycles so devastating that entire chapters of human achievement get erased from memory. The same forces that destroyed the megalithic builders, flooded the coastal civilizations, and erased the knowledge of Polynesian navigators are still operating today. Climate change, social collapse, and technological disruption continue threatening our accumulated wisdom just as they did thousands of years ago. Our current achievements might seem permanent and established, but history shows us exactly how quickly sophisticated societies can vanish without a trace. The question isn't whether we'll face our own lost epoch, but whether we'll recognize the warning signs before it's too late. The patterns are repeating, and we're running out of time to break the cycle.